What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. This is Josh Robinson with Joystick Gamer, and today we are doing our best hardcore parkour impression in Dying Light 2.
Parkour!
Before we get into it, I do want to make it known that I loved the parkour mechanics in Dying Light 1, and I was so excited to see what kind of changes they were going to make to improve on an already seemingly flawless system. After about 25 hours of gameplay, romping around town, and completing the story campaign, I'm left with really just one question. Does a great game really require a great story? Let's get into it. In Dying Light 2, you play as the main character Aiden, who stumbles upon the city of Villador, where you are barely alive and in need of desperate care. The story revolves around his desire to help find and save his sister from the scientific torture that they endured as children. It's your job to gain the trust of the Villador townfolk and try to find out where your sister may be located to try and save her. Once you complete the tutorial portion of the game, the European-inspired town of Villador becomes your open-world sandbox. Once this game opens up, you are free to go about the world however you see fit, and it often involved doing some crazy fun parkour lines. Above all else in this game, I want to point out how utterly satisfying the parkour system is in Dying Light 2. I found myself enjoying the journey to the next objective more than the objective itself because of how engaging the parkour felt. With large open world games all having a fast travel mechanic that is easy to rely on, it was so refreshing to be playing a game that cherished the journey and not the final destination. Similar to Dying Light 1, you start out with limited combat and parkour skills that can be improved through skill progression trees. They keep these trees separate, which forces you to make decisions on what you want to improve first. I pretty much tried to max out my parkour skills to start because of the system being oh so satisfying. The skills that you unlock pair so well with the progression because you feel these very tangible improvements such as longer jumps, better maneuverability around obstacles, and the ability to chain these moves together. Having this tangible progression paired with a responsive parkour control system left me oftentimes mobbing around town looking for slick lines to make and foregoing the next objective until I was satisfied. In regards to the combat portion of the skill tree, many of the abilities to unlock had a focus on adding parkour elements into your combat. I found that the combat abilities fell into two categories. One, you either use the ability every fight, or two, the ability feels so niche or specific that you often forget about it and don't use it. I'm not saying this is a knock on a good chunk of the abilities in the combat tree, but rather there are abilities that the game never really forces you to use or learn to complete an objective. Learning and mastering the full set of combat skills is something that you essentially will have to coach yourself to do because you can be successful in combat with just a few moves. I'm not saying that the full combat system is limited because it's actually very deep, but the game never really forces the issue of requiring you to use your full set of combat skills. Overall, with the skill trees, it did feel like the most important and impactful skills were on the parkour side of things. Outside of the improvements to the combat and subtle tweaks to the parkour, Techland made some major changes to how you approach nighttime. For those who didn't play the first one, when the sun goes down, the zombies come out, and my goodness is it terrifying. In the first game, it was very much ingrained into you that you never want to be outside at night, and you definitely get punished for it in the first game. Techland made changes to the night mechanics drastically and created more of a system that forced you to do certain things at night. To keep the stakes high and tensions even higher, they littered the streets with howlers, who are essentially zombie fire alarms alerting everyone around you if you get too close to them. If a howler got alerted, it queues up a chase where it is now your sole duty to run for your life to the nearest safe area. The longer it takes for you to get to a safe area, the stronger the chase becomes and the strongest zombies come out to play. It felt very much like the wanted level system in Grand Theft Auto, and it left me short of breath with my palms sweating from some of the frantic chases that occurred. There are also night-specific story and side missions in order to force the players to face their fear of night and complete very difficult objectives. The other main mechanic that was added is the addition of factions. The two factions that you are torn between are the survivors and the peacekeepers. The survivors are essentially the group that wants everyone to have a voice and be free, while the peacekeepers have a more military-minded approach to how the city should be run. Throughout the campaign and story, you work with both parties and sometimes have to make decisions on who you want to side with for the time being. Where these choices have the most impact is determining what factions get certain areas of the map. By giving areas to the Peacekeepers, it unlocks more offensive environmental abilities throughout the area, such as car traps or spike traps, to help take out zombies that might be chasing you. If you hand the land over to the survivors, you'll unlock more parkour environmental abilities, such as zip lines and launch pads. Due to the fact that your choice had direct impact on the environment, I often chose the survivors because I wanted to maximize my full parkour potential, and I found myself making decisions based off that and not on how it would affect the story. And without further ado, time to get to the story, which is likely where Dying Light 2 is going to take some heat. I'm not going to give any spoilers, but the premise throughout the entire game is pretty much finding your sister. Your main objectives often involve going around looking for someone who has info about her, finding them, having to do something to gain their trust, and then getting a small piece of info back about your sister. This becomes a bit of a rinse and repeat situation, which honestly wasn't a gripe of mine because the parkour mechanics were just so fun when getting from point A to point B that I didn't really care about the outcome of the objective. Throughout the story, you're met with fork-in-the-road decisions that early on felt like they had a lot of impact, but in reality only had a temporary effect. For example, there was a time early on in the game where I made a decision that definitely angered the opposing faction and left me feeling like I closed the door to a lot of missions from that faction, only to find out 2 missions later, I'm back working with them as if nothing had happened. It didn't feel like there was a disconnect or holes in the story because of it, but rather I put more stock into my decisions than the game did. Once again, no spoilers, but where I have issues with the story of this game is the last 20% of it. The campaign is a bit of a slow burn, but does provide enough twists to keep you wanting to find out more, so the pacing felt okay. Where the story loses me is that at some point, they begin to get away from what got you there. You build up all these awesome combat and parkour skills for hours, and then near the end of the game, you're not really using any of it. There are moments in this game where my palms were sweaty from doing parkour objectives that have you hundreds of stories in the air, yet near the end of the game, you're doing more puzzles than parkour? The story goes in a direction that felt like all my work leading up to the last 20% of the game didn't really matter from a mechanics standpoint because those mechanics weren't required to complete the tasks at hand. Pairing that with one of the more forgettable final boss fights that I've experienced in a game left a sour taste in my mouth when the credits rolled. However, I had to pause and think about an important question. Does a great game have to provide a great story? And my answer here is no, it doesn't. I was looking forward to this game because of the parkour mechanics from the first game, and they somehow made an amazing parkour system even better. This game truly is all about the journey and not about the destination because they make this game so easy to get distracted from what you originally set out to do. Did it bother me that the story fell a bit flat? Sure it did, but once I finished the closing credits and hopped back into the open world, I was quickly reminded about why this game was so fun. If an amazing story is the biggest criteria for a game for you to enjoy, then you will likely be left with a sour taste in your mouth. However, the side quests, parkour challenges, and open world goodness that you get from this game greatly makes up for them dropping the ball in the story just a little bit. I consider this a great game regardless of the story because I keep finding myself going back to the city of Villador to jump, skip, and slide along those rooftops. From a technical standpoint, I didn't really come across any bugs or technical issues with the game that many other reviewers were pointing out. Techland did have a day zero patch to fix a bunch of bugs, so I want to give you peace of mind that many of the bugs that you're likely seeing online have been fixed. The only time I ran into an issue was a mission where there was an in-game cutscene and none of the characters rendered, so I experienced a hilariously floating walkie-talkie for a bit. I found this to be quite the sight to behold and gave me way more laughs than frustrations. I did a quick game reboot and picked up right before the same cutscene with no issues. The graphics look great and the characters' faces were strikingly familiar to the point where I yelled out, "That's Rosario Dawson!" without prior knowledge of her involvement in the game. Near the end of the game, I did notice some frame rate drops, but only in times where I was standing in water and there were a lot of zombies in the water with me. If I had to guess, all those bodies messing with the water physics caused a bit of a frame rate dip, but other than that, I did not experience any of the bugs that many other reviewers mentioned having. Overall, I think this is a game that will get heat for how the story ended, but I don't think that it is fully deserved. Dying Light 2 is such a fun game to pick up and go do what you want and truly takes full advantage of what it feels like to play in a sandbox environment. The combat and parkour progression feels tangible and rewarding, so getting around town via rooftops will always be satisfying and intoxicating. Regardless of how the story played out, this game is worth grabbing for the high-octane parkour elements alone. There isn't a game out there that comes close to the feeling that Dying Light 2 creates with their parkour system, and I can't remember the last time a video game has made my palms sweat the way they did. If an amazing story is the main and only driving force into buying this game, then I would tell you to proceed with great caution. While Dying Light 2's story can fall flat at times, it's not enough to warrant passing up on this game. Dying Light 2 shows that fun and engaging gameplay mechanics make for a great game and also help you forgive and forget any shortcomings in the story. Even with its flaws, Dying Light 2 is a game that cracks my list of must-play games in 2022. Whether that is playing it now or later, it is a game that you don't want to miss out on because of that parkour experience alone. Thank you for watching this review of Dying Light 2. If you enjoyed the video, please show some love to the like and subscribe button so you don't miss out on future reviews. Do you agree that a game can be great even if it doesn't have a great story? Sound off in the comments and let me know what you think. Thank you again for watching. This is Josh Robinson with Joystick Gamer, and as always, stay gaming out there.